Namaste and hello, and welcome to the Hindu Women's Festival. Today we're having a cook-along, and we've got the lovely Sohini all the way from Brisbane. Do you want to say hello?
Hello.
And from the rest of the Beyond the Bindi team, we've got Vibhuti Patel and Bhavin Taylor.
Hello.
And myself, I'm Raghav. And we've got some lovely stuff to cook for you today. Should be nice and straightforward. Hope you've got the ingredients list. And if you haven't, don't worry. We'll put it in the description for you. So Sohini, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what we're cooking today?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are probably two of up there with my favorite dishes. The potato is called Jodubazaar potato, and there's a lot of stories with this particular potato dish. It's one of my favorite dishes for sure. It's something I think I can cook blindfolded because I've made it so many times. And the reason for that is because it's been on my supper club menu since I started doing supper clubs, which was nearly 2.5 years ago now. And it's been on every single menu as the canapé when people come in and get their drinks. So it's a really spicy, tangy dish with potatoes. It's very easy to make. And I think anyone who cooks it is going to be in love with it. I hope, at least. And then the second dish is a tomato chutney, which is actually very quintessentially Bengali. I have eaten it since I was born, probably, as a side to a lot of lunches and dinners. It's something every single Bengali household has a different version of. So it's not like my version is the version, as with any Bengali cooking. It's very up to you and up to your taste buds, how you tweak the dish. But the base is tomatoes. It's sweet and sticky, and it's really good with a lot of food. So good cupboard staple.
Awesome. So you mentioned something. For those of you who don't know, Sohini is an incredible chef. She started something called Smoke and Lime. If you have a look, if you've got your phones, look on Instagram, Smoke and Lime, give it a follow, and you can look through all the incredible things that she's been cooking. Look through her highlights. I did that the other day. Lots of really good recipes. You can see her cook loads of lovely colors as well. And yeah, she's a private chef. She does these supper clubs, which I haven't actually had the benefit of, but I know maybe Vibhuti has been there to one of the supper clubs.
I've been, and I can vouch for Sohini's excellent cooking. It was just the most fun. We had a Bengali inspired, slightly Christmassy kind of meal, because it was around Christmas time that a few of us came to your supper club, and it was excellent. So I feel very lucky that I'm getting a chance to learn a couple of your recipes because I enjoyed your food so much.
Yay, thank you.
And Sohini's joining us from Brisbane, all the way from Australia. So thanks, Sohini, for tuning in. And if you're in Brisbane, maybe try and get in touch and book your own supper club. That'd be good. Yeah, we'll wait until she comes back, hopefully, one time to the UK. Some point to the UK. Okay, so should we go through the ingredients list? Maybe just make sure everyone's got everything. It's chopped.
So for the potato dish, you need potatoes. We are going to be starting that with parboiled potatoes / kind of boiled. So I'm just going to show everyone. I have always just left the skin on my potatoes because I like the taste of potato skin. Also, any street food in India, generally they don't peel potatoes because it's just another waste product. So you don't really need to peel it for this. And then cumin powder, cumin seeds, green chili, ginger, tamarind, or some ketchup. And we'll get to why that's an or, because technically they're not the same. Lime juice, salt, and some oil. Yeah.
Well, I've just realized I haven't got my green chili out of the fridge, so I'm just going to go and do that now.
Sohini, you'll tell us how much we need as we go along, right?
Sorry?
You'll tell us how much we need as we go along.
Yeah, I will. Don't worry. I will give you some measurements. But the reason I didn't actually give measurements is because otherwise people it depends on how much you're making. You might be making a little bit more than me and vice versa. So it's good to have like a little amount in a bowl or something, and then you can kind of add and tweak
Brilliant, yeah.
accordingly.
Yeah. I've just realised that it's vegan, isn't it? Is it? Unless you're using honey.
It is. Yeah, it is. A lot. I mean, a lot of Bengali food is just vegan. It's not trying to be vegan. It just happens to be vegan. And it's kind of how I grew up eating. I'm not vegan. I do enjoy my fish and my meat and other things, but a lot of the food that we eat at home pretty much during the week just does happen to be vegan. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, hopefully then it means everyone can get involved, so that's good.
Yeah, it's really good, and I think it shouldn't. A lot of it again, like, doesn't really have like a lot of the allergens. A lot of the food just by default, so it's very easy to just like do, even if you're having a lot of dietary requirements.
Sohini, can I ask? It seems like quite a basic question, but what kind of oil should people be using as they start off this dish?
So ideally mustard oil, because Bengali food is pretty much entirely based around mustard oil. It's just what's regional, and it actually adds some flavor into any of our food. However, you can just use sunflower oil, it's fine. I'd recommend not using, like, I don't know, other flavored oils, just because it can mess with the overall taste.
Okay, all right. But bog standard rapeseed oil will be okay then, because I guess that's the most local oil in the UK.
Yeah, just normal vegetable sunflower oil is fine. You'd rather go for an unflavored one than like a strong flavor that's something else that's not mustard oil. Yeah.
Okay.
And for the tomato chutney, should I do those ingredients as well?
Yeah, please do.
So that's pretty basic, just tomatoes, sugar or dates. Now, traditionally, it's meant to have either dates or we use something called amshattu, which is dried mango, but sugar's great. Brown sugar is preferable. Again, it has a bit of that kind of brown color, which adds to the dish. And then nigella seeds or kalonji, or onion seeds, it has lots of different names. And then lime juice, salt, and oil. That's pretty much it. And chili if you want it a little bit spicy, but that's optional.
Can I say I've never cooked with nigella seeds until your
Really?
recipe?
Oh, you're in for such a treat, because it's actually one of my favorite spices. It's a really good spice.
It took me about 10 minutes to find it in the shop, to be honest. I was like, I don't know what I'm looking for, but yeah, I've got it.
They're good. They're good for like lots of different things. Actually, they're used in a lot of different Indian foods. They're also used for baking, actually, like just not even Indian stuff, but like in cookies and bread and things. It has a really like, kind of subtle, nutty flavor, but if you fry them, it smells a bit like onion. So
you can smell it.
Yeah, it's good.
It's
a good dish. It's a good spice, sorry, not a good dish. Yeah.
So where do we get started, Sohini?
Yeah,
okay, right, starting. Okay, so we'll get your pan on. I would say let's do the potatoes first, and then we can, the tomato chutney takes a little bit of time because it just needs to simmer. So we'll do that after we've done the potatoes, which is very quick.
Okay. And on a high heat, medium heat, what kind of heat should we have underneath the pan?
Medium to start with, and then we'll turn it to high right at the end and then switch it off. This dish is always cooked with boiled potatoes because it's a lot quicker. The spices can burn really quickly otherwise, so I wouldn't recommend doing raw potatoes in this dish. So when you're boiling potatoes, lots of salt in the boiling water, just because it helps the potato be salty, and it's just easier because then the actual dish takes like 2 minutes. So right. And then into the pan, if you guys add like a couple of teaspoons of oil, depending on how much potatoes, I think it was around 8 to 10 potatoes, just a couple of teaspoons is good. You want it to coat all of the kind of bottom of the pan pretty much, but not like have a thick layer, just like a sheen on the bottom.
Okay.
And then once that's a little bit hotter, so is anyone actually using mustard oil? Don't think so, right?
I'm afraid I don't have mustard oil.
Mustard oil just takes a bit longer to get hot, but that's fine. So once you've added your oil, 2 green chilies is what you need. If you have one, that's fine as well, but ideally 2. I just snap it in half. You don't need to cut it or anything.
Oh,
Just
really?
literally snap it in half.
I was going to say this is you're going to get this a lot, that I've kind of substituted a few things in just because. So I have green chili paste that just kind of lives in my fridge.
That's okay. So then if you have paste, don't add it now. Add it later.
Okay, add it later. Okay.
The splatter.
And I mention this because I think a lot of Indian households might do that. And I'm not saying that everyone watching this is from an Indian household, but I know a lot of us will just have like green chili just minced up ready in the fridge. Okay, so you'll let me know when to add that later?
Yeah, so you can add that in like right at the end. So don't
Sure, you just snap it and put it in, right?
Snap it in, and then basically, as soon as you've done that, get your cumin seeds, not the powder. So if you're using just cumin powder, don't do it yet, because seeds again take a little bit more heat than powder does. So I'm gonna grab a spoon. Sorry. So I never measure anything.
No, right? I don't
even have teaspoons. I just use pinches.
Yeah, it's a very Indian way of cooking, isn't it? Like, it's a very Indian way of cooking.
You need a big heaped teaspoon, okay? So like it's a lot of cumin seeds, yeah? So this dish is very cuminy, so you need a lot of cumin seeds. And I'm actually gonna add a bit more because I'm cooking a bit more quantity-wise today. But if you're doing, again, 8 to 10 baby potatoes, then 1 heaped teaspoon is good. And just keep that heat on medium, and the seeds, they shouldn't like pop at you. They should just like start to crackle. Yeah. So when they're crackling, I'm gonna add our potatoes in that are boiled. And then just let the potatoes like just sit and chill out on the pan for like a little bit. How's yours? How's everyone's looking? Yeah, add your potatoes in. Don't worry about stirring the potatoes immediately because you want it to have a little bit of color on one of the sides. So just sit there. And then cumin powder. We're going to add a heaped teaspoon as well. If you don't have cumin powder and you're just using the seeds, just add a bit more seed. You can add another half a teaspoon. So if you're doing cumin powder, we're going to do like a heaped teaspoon. So there is one little element to this dish which people can do if they want. I didn't add it into the recipe because it's a whole like separate thing. Bengalis have this spice which is called bhaja masala, and it's toasted cumin and chilies. I would absolutely recommend that you make this spice because it's incredible. It's used on a lot of our chaats and our food. And all you do is dry toast cumin seeds and like the dry red chilies like these on a pan, and then grind it up once it's cooled down. So, and that's like a really home staple spice that we have. Okay, so now we can toss through with the cumin powder.
Wait, are we adding the red chilies now, or?
No, we're not adding the red chilies yet. Don't worry. That was just for the spice that we have.
Oh, right, okay.
Just toss it through. And so this next bit's really quick, okay? So if everyone has their, if you're using tamarind sauce, ketchup, tamarind pulp, whatever you have, just have that ready and have your ginger ready as well. So I'm using pasted ginger, like Vib is as well, but if you're using the fresh ginger, you can just grate some in and count till 5, like a bit slowly, you know, like in seconds, not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just, that's how I do it.
You're grating it straight in, Sohini, right?
How?
You're grating it straight in.
Grate it straight into the pan, yeah. And if you're using ginger paste, go with half a teaspoon.
Okay.
And then as soon as you've added that ginger paste, add in your tamarind. So we're gonna, if you're using the concentrate, I think me and Viv are using the concentrate, which is very strong. That's 1 teaspoon. If you're using tamarind sauce, I would go with about 3 teaspoons. And if you're using ketchup, about 2. So
Well, that
tamarind
makes-
concentrate is a lot stronger, which is why I say use a bit less.
Sorry, Shirley, if I'm using the tamarind sauce, how much did we say?
3.
3, sorry. Right.
Give it like a good glug in, you'll be fine. And then turn your heat really high for like a minute and then turn it off. That is it. And then we're gonna just chop in the red chilies at the end. And again, no one get confused that I'm adding 2. I'm cooking double the quantity today. In case, like, why is she adding more?
That is such a great smell that's coming from the pan
smells
now that the tamarind has gone in. It's just so aromatic.
Potatoes are looking really good.
It's really like quick and easy. And then basically if you're using dry red chili, just get some scissors and chop it in like pretty fine, because you don't want big chunks of dry red chili. If you're using green chili paste, add it in now.
Okay.
If you're using green chilies on top and you can handle a bit more spice, I always add in a few more chopped green chilies at the end as well.
So how much of my paste should I add, Sohini?
I'd say like half a teaspoon, because
Okay.
paste is quite strong. Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Okay, and then I again have salted my potatoes a lot when I boiled them. If you haven't salted and haven't added any of that, add in like a teaspoon of salt, sprinkle it on, and just toss it through. Maybe like a flat teaspoon though, not a big heap teaspoon. This is a street food dish. So like back in India or like where I've had this dish, which is from Jodubazaar, which is a market outside my house in Kolkata. They use black salt, which is kala namak. So it has the more like street foody smell. You can just use normal salt, but if you have black salt at home, I would 100% recommend using that instead of normal salt. And then just toss it through. Great to garnish with some fresh coriander. That's it, actually. That's the dish. I know it's very easy.
I just disappeared to go and open my window because I realized I didn't put my extractor fan on because I didn't want the noise.
Make sure everyone switch their heat off now, because otherwise that powder will burn.
When does the brown sugar go in?
Oh yeah, amazing.
Visual. Obviously your color will be a little bit different if you use like tamarind sauce and like tomato sauce. The color will vary. That's with tamarind concentrate. And if anyone was using fresh tomato, that you can chop in really finely again, like towards the end. So like now would be fine because it's still very hot even after the heat is off. So you can just chop that through pretty finely, but don't worry if you've used tamarind and the other stuff. So it's a tangy, spicy dish. So don't be scared of the chili in this dish. It's your friend.
I like that. I feel like I need to get that on a t-shirt.
This dish is eaten like where it came from is from the street stall that I used to eat it at, and it's meant to give you that like, oh my god, it's hot sort of thing. So like it's not meant to be a milder dish.
So Joanie, you said that this is one of your favorite dishes.
Yeah.
What kind of I guess like are there particular memories or experiences that kind of get evoked when you make this dish or when you eat it?
Oh gosh, there's two actually now. I think when I started doing this dish for the supper clubs, it was very much that I would think of like being at this street stall in this market in India, but now it actually just reminds me of having a supper club the day or the next day. So yeah, I think there's a bit of both now. It definitely, like, I know once I've cooked this, I've got a supper club coming. That's when I make this.
And also, it's so easy. I can't believe.
It's really easy, and it's because the potatoes are already boiled, actually. So it's quite like, I don't know, it's almost like a potato salad, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And if you just stick the lid on after you're done and just keep it warm for about 10-15 minutes, then it allows the flavors to kind of go in even more. What I would say, if you like use tamarind sauce and used tomato or ketchup, add a big squeeze of lime juice on top, and that brings out the tanginess a bit more as well.
So
yeah,
do that.
Go with half a lime if you're using whole lime, and squeeze, like give it like a good squeeze on top and get that tangy flavor in it. And then we can probably try this in a bit once it's cooled down and it won't burn our mouths. Okay.
Where do you
probably get tomato started pretty soon as well?
Sohini, where does your inspiration come from? Like, cooking is obviously something you do pretty, kind of as a profession now, but that's clearly come from a lot of love for food and cooking. Where does that inspiration come from?
I don't know. It comes from everything. I don't have actually one thing that I get inspired by. I don't know. It could be watching something. It could be listening to a podcast. It could be some music. It could be smelling something. I would say like most commonly it's when I've eaten something that I've clocked the flavor of. So probably if it's like most common, it's that. And then again, a lot of it comes from my home food and what I grew up eating still. Obviously I try and use a lot of new ingredients and global ingredients to like kind of do my own thing to it, but it's never been to try and do something new. It's just, I think something would work.
Yeah.
I feel like I'd never try and force something. And even when, like for my Supperclub menus, a lot of it is quite fusiony, and I don't really like that word because to me, it's just what it should taste of. But I guess if you're reading it or you're looking at it on, I don't know, my Instagram or Facebook, it can seem like I'm trying to do a lot of stuff, which I've had people ask me, but then I don't even go through that process of being like, oh, I'm going to try and use this thing and that thing. It's just something I think is going to be tasty. That's kind of the bottom line.
Shirley, can I just ask, when you mentioned this fusion idea, because we do find quite a lot of dishes, I say quite a lot, of dishes that do include some of the flavors from the Western world. Do you find that with your recipes, or do you feel like you want to keep it quite authentic?
See, this authentic word is constantly something me and my partner, we discuss it so much actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like my food is authentic to me.
Okay.
It might not be authentic to my mom or my grandma or my auntie.
Right.
But to me, that's what I want it to taste of. So I don't know. I don't think about it that much actually. I really do let my taste buds guide me. It's really how I cook. I don't read too much into it. I don't think about it too intensely. But if I find, it's completely like on my taste and my smell as well, and my touch and my feel, a lot of those senses get involved. I can get like, sorry, go on.
Like we use ketchup in the tomato chutney shortly. Yeah. I'm assuming our generations above us didn't do that.
Well, my grandma actually did use ketchup in her food. But no, ketchup, I don't know if my grandma did always use ketchup or if my mom used ketchup and then she told my grandma and now she uses ketchup. I don't know which way around it went. But there's a lot of ingredients, I think, again, you wouldn't associate like with what we're saying is authentic, but they're used because they're available and they're in your cupboard. And it doesn't need to be like, the most authentic or traditional thing, but if it works, it works. Like ketchup's a really good example because I've grown up with my mom using it in a lot of food, but it's not to taste of ketchup. Ketchup just has a lot of sugar, salt, and acid. So it brings a really good balance to food. It shouldn't taste of ketchup. It's just, instead of adding the sugar, the salt, and the acid separately, you're just adding a paste.
Because it's easier. Yeah,
because it's easier and it's always in your cupboard and it doesn't go off.
Right.
And I'm all for using sauces and condiments in my cooking. If you guys saw my cupboard, it's basically just a supermarket shelf of sauces. But I don't use them as their sauces. I would use them for the flavors that I think they would put into that dish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, because sometimes people can think that making, you know, like, honestly, you guys at home can't smell this. My kitchen smells amazing right now. That's the, you know, the smells from this
She's just
dish
saying she's done a really good job.
is that it just smells brilliant. And I think that people can think that sometimes food that is that kind of flavoursome and interesting must be really complicated to make. Or, you know, this kind of idea that, oh, Indian food, you have to have like all of this stuff and it's got to be just right. I think what you're saying is that actually you can create things that have got all the flavors and are really exciting to eat, but they're not complicated, and they don't need all of these specialist ingredients necessarily.
Yeah, I've always thought about food that way. Just, I don't know what, it might be because of my mum, probably, because I don't think when she cooked, like, it never took her the whole day of cooking. She'd cook like half an hour and we'd have like 4 dishes for dinner. So I'm definitely one of those cooks. I can cook like 3 dishes in like 20 minutes if I'm like pushed for time. But a lot of, you're right, there's like this whole conception of not just Indian food, but Asian food and other cuisines where it's, you have to have those exact things and you have to spend all this time. But I'm very pro substituting stuff. And I get asked that a lot, especially on Instagram posts, etc., that like, you know, I don't have this, or, you know, it's lockdown, I can't go and get this. But more often than not, there will be a substitute and it will be in your cupboard already. But you're just not thinking of putting that in this dish because it doesn't match with the cuisine. But actually, it doesn't matter so much. It's just what's in it and what the flavor is.
Oh. Yeah. Should we get started with the chutney and then we can carry on?
Yes,
we can carry on chatting.
Yeah, so I've got a little saucepan for this. So a saucepan's best. You can use a frying pan. It's fine. It's just it might like splatter a little bit more. So it should be fine in what you've got. Yeah, that should be okay. Sorry, just going back to the whole substitute thing. There was one of my favorite ones that I get asked. It's a lot to do with just like different types of salt in food, and I love salty food, and I'm all pro like putting in, because I think that's like the main thing that adds flavor to food, very honestly speaking. Not complicated spices, but just the right amount of salt. And I got asked many times about like, oh, I don't have this thing or that thing, especially when it comes to like stocks or like, I don't know, things like miso, and different things that add flavor. And I'm always like, you can substitute with like stock cubes, Maggi seasoning, soy sauce. And I put soy sauce in Indian food. It doesn't taste of soy sauce, it just tastes of salt. But you can do a lot of these things. I just think people are too scared.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that's a takeaway from today, that people stop being scared about your cooking.
You have to just think outside of that cuisine's box, and that's it. Like, I think of ingredients as like this one big thing, as opposed to boxed off into different countries and continents and whatnot. So I'll put Japanese ingredients in my Bengali dish, but it won't taste Japanese. It'll just enhance the Bengaliness of the dish. So,
nice.
Yeah. Okay, hot saucepan, and then we're just going to add like a little touch of oil. So this isn't to fry anything, it's just to stop things from sticking. So literally like a tiny little splash is good. And this is all on kind of like low heat, because you don't want to, we're not frying anything. It's just like a slow simmering dish. So into the oil. Now this is, again, optional. I've grown up with having my chutney a little bit spicy, not like blow your head off, but like a hint of spiciness. So I put in half a red chili, just whole, not chopped up or anything, into that oil, just to infuse the oil. And then we'll do half a teaspoon of the onion seeds. So that's Nigella seeds, if you guys can see. It looks black, kind of looks like cumin, but not really. So half a teaspoon of that into the oil. And this is going to smell really nice already, actually. I always love the smell.
This is definitely a first for me. I've never, like I said.
I'm so happy. This is great. I love when this happens.
Never used Nigella seeds before.
Well, it's going to be a first, and you should use them. You should make the potatoes with these seeds as well instead of the cumin. It's a whole different flavor. Okay. Okay, and then once you've added that, just add in your chopped tomatoes. Just remember to keep the heat like really low. I don't want it to like, we're not making like a base of a dish, we're just making a chutney. So we just want them to slowly cook away. There's a lot of variations to tomato chutney. You can do onion seeds, you can do mustard seeds, you can not put any spice and just have like the flavor of the tomato. You can also add a bit of fennel seed if you want to like vary it up. But this is like the most homey basic one. Okay, so we're just gonna let those tomatoes just like kind of melt. And then for the kind of sweetness element of it, I like using dates because my mom used dates, or this thing called amshotto, which I mentioned.
Yeah.
But you can use brown sugar, you can use honey, you can use like the sugar as well. It's just not going to give you that exact like deepness of color, but it's fine to use any sweetener basically for this.
I'm just going for bulk standard brown sugar from my baking cupboard.
Fine. So we're using brown sugar, and so this recipe was for like 4 large tomatoes or like a pack of cherry tomatoes. You need 2 big tablespoons of the brown sugar. If you're using honey, I would use about 3 tablespoons, a little bit more.
Oh.
And if you're using dates, like a handful of dates, like something that fits in your palm, chopped up, soaked in water really helps because it kind of just softens the dates, but you don't have to soak it or anything. If you have date molasses, which are actually, like thinking back to UK, like it is available in like most Tesco's and Sainsbury's. So it's usually in the baking aisle as like a really dark looking jar for date molasses. That's ideal because
other supermarkets are available.
Yes. Oh, I think Viv is stuck. Someone's
frozen. She's back.
Yeah, so date molasses is ideal. You're good. I can see you now. And it's because in India, generally when you make this sort of chutney, you use gur, which is jaggery, and date molasses has that flavor, but dates and sugar is fine. It's just not as deep.
So my mum always has gur in the cupboard. Like she just always.
Yeah, me too. I always have. I mean, I have some here. There's some great. I always grate it in instead of sugar into dishes.
Yeah.
What is it? Because I think a lot of us have had it, but don't actually know what it is. It's just sugar.
So gur is basically unrefined sugar. It's like the kind of not processed sugar that you can have lots of different types of gur. It can come from date trees, palm trees, coconut trees.
I see.
And it's just the sugar that comes from those trees. You can have it in like a block form. I think they even sell it in like a powdered sugar form, or you can have it runny. But it kind of depends on where it's from, really.
Because Tony, this goes back to my earlier point about the East-West, because I remember vividly going to my local Tesco a couple of years ago and they didn't sell it. So, but yeah, the Asian store, I live in Southall, so you can imagine there's Asian stores everywhere.
You should have access to everything.
And Nigella seeds. But yeah, the main supermarket didn't sell it.
But you know, these things are so much more available. Like, so you live in Southall. I live in Cambridge. Yeah, even I now have a small Indian fruit veg grocery shop around the corner from me that sells everything. And currently it's super exciting because we're in mango season. And so
that's so great.
I have mango supplies round the corner. It's excellent. So actually, even when you live in places like I do that doesn't have a huge Indian Asian population, you can get your stuff.
Okay, so into that, we're just gonna let it simmer away. Like mine's on like a really gentle boil. We're gonna add like a big pinch of salt, and that's just to kind of balance the dish. I'm not gonna say teaspoon because it's not even quarter teaspoon. It's just a big pinch. Pinch of salt, and then that's pretty much it. You can add a little bit of turmeric into it just for like the pop of color, but usually cherry tomatoes are quite deep, so like that's like a more color thing. It's not a taste thing. And that's pretty much a tomato chutney. You need to let that cook for like 20-25 minutes for it to become like jammy.
do we leave it uncovered or do we put a lid on it?
Yeah, I usually leave it uncovered.
Okay.
It depends on the saucepan, because I think if it's a flat one, like he's using a frying pan, it might be good to cover it because then it won't dry out too much. But if you've got something deep, then it should be okay. And then right at the end, when we've switched it off, which might be off camera, squeeze in some lime juice, and that kind of helps make it last longer, and it gives it the tanginess.
Nice. So the consistency, Sohini, we want is like jam.
Yeah, it should look like, well, not really like jam. It should have the consistency of like a tomato, like, you know, the tinned chopped tomatoes.
Okay.
Almost like that, like broken down, little bit sticky. If you obviously you're using honey, so it's going to be a bit stickier, but something you can like scoop into a jar and it's going to like stick to the spoon a little bit. Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah.
So this is going to be there for about, you said about 25.
Yeah, 20-25 minutes. We just want, we can let it run and then we can do a little view of it, like when we're like kind of finishing up and see. Because you just want, basically what you want is all the tomatoes to break down and most of the water from the tomatoes to evaporate. Okay. So you're left with like a pretty concentrated sweet tomato flavor with a bit of spice in the background.
So while our chutneys are cooking then, let's have a chat a bit more with you and about kind of the cooking that you do and a bit about some of the things that we've been talking about in this festival. So you talked a bit about your mum cooking, and you know, it was one of the things. So we've got two lovely guys from the festival team, from the Beyond the Bindi team on the call. But I'll be honest, I very much grew up in a sort of Indian family where cooking was something that women did. And you know, this is just my personal experience. I often found it quite frustrating when I was growing up that there seemed to be this almost, you know, there was a love of cooking. My mum loves cooking. I get my love of cooking from my mum, but there was also an expectation that cooking was something that women did and the men sat and waited to be served. And I guess part of it, I'm never sure if that's just my family, if it's like a cultural thing. I know it's not just an Indian thing. But now, Raghav's in the kitchen, Bhavin's in the kitchen. I have, the men of my generation in my family now are much more involved in the kitchen. What was your experience like? How, in terms of, culturally, that whole male-female divide that can happen when it comes to being in the kitchen?
I think I grew up in a similar sort of setting to what you were saying. My mum did the cooking. My mum's an incredible cook and she loves cooking. But obviously that comes almost automatically with the expectation that women cook. My dad's actually pretty good at cooking. He used to cook every now and then, and there's one or two dishes that I know I really liked eating when he made it. And I also have lots of friends whose parents cook pretty equally, I would say, or like at least, somewhat equally. But I think majority, even now, I think is still very female-led. I feel really differently about this, I think, because for me, I love cooking, but I don't want that expectation to be like, I don't know, I don't even know how to phrase this very well, but like, I don't want that expectation to lead my personality. Like I want my personality to lead that. And I think when I actually started cooking, well, firstly, no one took it seriously. Some people still don't take it seriously, and I those comments filter in every now and then, but it's almost like I've done a degree in something else, I've done a master's in something else, but it's almost like, why are you cooking? Because that's just what you would do anyway. So why are you doing that as your main thing? Whereas to me, it's like, actually, it's what I'm passionate about, and I can also earn money through it. Yeah. And it's great that I figured that out, and I'm really happy I figured that out in my life. So it's a weird, complicated one, because I know a lot of my friends and people our age as well probably think quite similarly, and they might just not say it, because it is one of those things that you're like, oh yeah, like that's fine, you're the female, you're the one that cooks. But I've never wanted to be led by that, and I've had a lot of those comments and questions when I started out my journey, and I still do. And I think it's a weird one, because I often struggle with explaining it to someone that doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's
cook.
Sorry?
With a half cook.
Yeah, he actually cooks really well. I'm just really weird and I don't like other people cooking. I'm a terrible backseat cook. So I will try and like be in charge of anything that's being cooked.
Okay.
Yeah. I suppose the only thing that, the main thing that's wrong is any expectation, you know, that anyone should be something, you know. So the expectation that women should cook it is wrong, but actually, if you're a great cook, it doesn't matter, you know.
Exactly.
Who you
What
are, it
gender
shouldn't matter.
Yeah,
In
I
fact,
mean, I agree with that, and I think other people do agree with that. But I've seen it with like couples that, like, you know, they're both in the same job or like, you know, equal jobs in whatever field they're in. They'll come home and the girl is the one that's still cooking, and it's just so bizarre that that's the norm. Whereas I fully think it should be 50-50, and it doesn't matter, even if I'm sitting at home and my other half isn't, but the actual cooking as a household chore, like, you should be sharing it, and it's feeding both mouths, or, you know, however many mouths. So it shouldn't be like one person's responsibility ever, but it often is. And I think even in my family, it is like my mom is always the one who's cooking. So it's just something I hope changes a little bit, but I don't know how hopeful I am about that one.
yeah, it might be just a thing that will just naturally change with time. I mean, it's strange because I've never had that perception of cooking. Like the only female in my household is my mum, but I've always enjoyed watching and cooking along. And for those of you who know me, I love food. I literally love food. And when I learned that I could make that, it became something that I just enjoy doing. So, but maybe that sort of culture is something that's changing, you know, whether there's an expectation, and it's just more to do with, obviously there's the household stuff, like the balance of responsibilities, but then obviously, Sohini, you've taken it to the next step because it's what you're obviously incredible at. So you were just owning the kitchen, basically, owning that space.
Yeah, I think it's almost like, for me, it didn't like kind of start out as this, but I think it does filter in a little bit now. Like, I almost want it to be like the Indian, at least female gaze of like, you should be reclaiming that space, and it should be you should be doing it because you want to be doing it, not because you're expected to do it. And for me, it's always been that, like, I love cooking, and actually, yes, firstly, I cook pretty much every day because I enjoy the process and I have new ideas. But even if you're not doing that, you should only be doing it if you really want to. And I feel for probably close to, like, I don't know, 70-80% of people, they just do it because they have to, and they have to eat dinner and they have to feed other people. And that, like, always irks me a little bit, even with my own family, or like a lot of other of my parents' friends and aunties and relatives, etc. Which is why when they hear about me cooking as like almost like a passion, hobby, job, they're just confused, because they can't even understand why I would enjoy doing it, or why someone would enjoy doing it, because it's, to them, it's like almost like a chore. Yeah.
But I mean, it's an interesting one here, and we probably don't have time to discuss this, but I think food in our cultures is a fundamental for like a social norm and social expectations vis-a-vis the Western world. Like, if you go to an Asian home to visit, you won't leave without being fed.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
So there's something really intricate and long-lived about the notion of food, because of the cooking, that is inherent in our upbringing. And I've had this conversation.
Absolutely. Food is like, I don't know, it's almost close to like, I mean, I'm going to relate this back to a little bit, because I know we're part of like this, you know, this week of Hindu culture as well. It is almost like, it's like a temple thing. It's a religious thing where it started out. And I'm not a hugely religious person, but to me, that's kind of where it comes from. Okay. But I also find it very problematic, a little bit shocking that, like, in any houses in India, even now, and I'm talking like, you know, modern flats, or, you know, whatever, something that's been built recently, the kitchen's the smallest part of the house. And I find that really yeah, just not okay, because it's actually the center of every damn household.
Yeah,
And if you don't have a kitchen, you don't really have a house, because then it's just bedrooms and it's a hotel. So to me, it should be like the central focus of any house. However, even in my like house back home in Calcutta, the kitchen is honestly so little, and all the women in my family have spent their entire lives in that kitchen. I don't know how they've managed, but they have, and that's their space. And when they see that I have an open kitchen, and that's something I'm really kind of always insistent on wherever I live, because especially with the supper clubs, I want people to be able to see me cooking. A lot of my relatives find that really bizarre, that I would want people to watch me cook. So it's a strange thing. I think you're right. For our culture, it's so integral. Like, I don't think anyone knows anything like beyond eating, and like any gatherings and celebration, it's all about eating.
exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that about the kitchens in the house, because our family home back in India, in Gujarat, was the same. So the kitchen was quite like this kind of sort of closed off space, and then there was like the dining area. And then actually, so my grandparents passed away a long time ago, and it was my uncle, who also recently passed away, who's lived, you know, outside India most of his life. He remodeled the kitchen area in the house in India, and now it is open plan. So when you're cooking in the kitchen, you're also in the dining space. And it is really interesting that he kind of just took that, I guess, the idea of living in the West a lot, and took that back to the house in India, so that when we're in the house in India now, although we know we're in the same space where my grandmother would have done all of her cooking, it's kind of been redone so that it's got that kind of more of our kind of modern sentiment of how we like to do things, so that the people you're eating with are involved as you're cooking.
Yeah, involved in seeing the actual work that goes on. And often I'll recommend a really good film I've watched quite recently, literally recommended it to all my friends. But it's a Malayalam movie. It is on Amazon, so it's got like it's got subtitles. I don't know Malayalam, so but it's called The Great Indian Kitchen, and it is absolutely amazing, the movie, because it's a really simple story, but it's basically what we're talking about like this kitchen being like the central point of like the household, but then no one pays any attention to it. But then if that stops running, then your household stops running. But I think with my sort of cooking journey, I honestly, I didn't start out at all, even considering that I just like cooking. I like feeding people and I like hosting. But it is something I actively want to talk about more, because it's really important. And I really think that firstly, anyone and everyone should cook, because it's just, it's a third of your day. Like, I don't know what you're doing if you're not feeding yourself, to be honest. And I think anyone who says they love food and they like eating should try cooking, regardless of what it is. You should at least give it a go and see the work that goes into it.
Well, yeah, you were saying, it's like, Bhavin, the point that you were making about how it's such a big part of our culture. And then also this idea, you know, just Asian, Indian culture generally, but then also like coming from a Hindu background, and how it's connected to like worship, and that idea that when anything that's like religious that's happening, we have the concept of prasad, where you're kind of offering the food and making an offering of the food before you eat it yourself. And for me, so like you, Sohini, I don't consider myself a particularly religious person in that sense, in terms of like faith and praying. What I really like about that idea is that it's a moment to stop and think about exactly what you were saying about what goes into making that food that you're about to eat. And so rather than just being like, I'm hungry, the food, I'm going to eat it, you take that moment to stop and think about your food as prasad. And, you know, in certain families or in certain households, or even people might sort of, there's a bhojan mantra, or there's a mantra that you say before you eat. For me, it's less about the religious aspect as such. And I think it's that moment to just stop and say, gosh, how much went into making this food that I'm going to eat now that's on my plate? Not just the person who cooked it, but where that food came from, you know, the person who cultivated everything that went into that meal. And I think that's, for me, that's, when I think about food and culture, that's one thing, as well as all the enormous like festivals and family gatherings where you just got all the food and everything. That for me is a really important thing, is that moment to just stop and say, I appreciate everything that went into making this food that I'm about to have.
I think it's so important that we all do that. It's mindfulness. It's old school mindfulness. That's what it is. And I feel like you should take, I don't know, even in a normal day, it's always something that you should just take like, you know, a minute of your time to appreciate where all this stuff has just appeared or like, you know, from on your plate and you're eating it. And I think, well, I'm also guilty of like kind of forgetting about it. But for me, that comes when I cook and I'm standing here. And it's actually why I started cooking like maybe around 5-6 years ago. It's because I found it a really good form of mindfulness. And I wanted something that would take me away from everything else and there'd be I focus on it. And actually when I cook, I don't think about anything else. I'm just thinking about what I'm doing and my actions and my senses. And I think it's a beautiful way to just like kind of like tune in with yourself and everything around you. So it's the little simple things, and I really do. I think especially with like the stuff I post on Instagram, like I want people to just think it's actually approachable, because it is approachable. You guys saw how easy these 2 recipes were. Obviously there's long ones, and there's sometimes I will spend half a day cooking stuff, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, and definitely having been to one of your supper clubs, some of the things that you served up on the plate, they were definitely not things that were cooked in 20 minutes. Those are things that hours of care had been put into, and they were wonderful.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, honestly. Like a lot of the food I cook is very, very quick. And it's one of the, like, I actually don't like standing and cooking for a long time. So I am all pro, like I said, I'm all pro substitutes. I'm all pro shortcuts. And as long as the flavor is exactly where it needs to be, it doesn't matter how you got there exactly. So yeah, I'm all for that. There's a lot of stuff I've been doing recently that's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And actually it is very possible. It's just, you need to really focus for those 10, 15 minutes. You can't do like something else and cook. And I just really want people to like kind of understand that a little bit more. How is everyone's chutney looking, by the way?
The water's
it's looking like pretty dry, yeah.
I popped a lid on mine.
You've got to lift it up a bit more to the camera.
Yeah.
Oh, you need to add a little bit more water or sugar into your, just slight like moisture, because mine's quite watery, but maybe my tomatoes are very watery. That one looks good actually. You just what I'd recommend is you want to kind of get your tomatoes cooked down a little bit more, so add a splash of water and let it continue cooking.
Okay, brilliant.
I'm gonna get a drop of water.
I'll show, I mean, mine's not ready yet, but you kind of almost like, I mean, mine you can lift up in a spoon, like kind of, it does stay, but it's still like very juicy.
So
you know have I missed something? Where was the tomato ketchup supposed to go?
The tomato ketchup went in the other dish.
Oh shit. Oh.
No, but you had tamarind. You had tamarind, didn't you?
Sauce, it's
Yeah,
all good, don't worry.
tamarind.
That's like
Okay.
and like it wasn't together. Don't worry.
I had it ready in the bowl as well. I've not used it. There you go.
You can dip something else in it later.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Just like dip something in it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Sohini, so obviously we've talked about the fact that you're of Bengali origin. That's where your family comes from. You're cooking here today with 3 Gujaratis from the complete opposite side of India. So while the chutney's still doing, tell us a bit about food in the Bengali culture and what food means to you in terms of your connection to being a Bengali.
Oh gosh, I think this is a really big one actually. All Bengalis are obsessed with food. And if they're not, I don't really think they're Bengali, is what my opinion is.
A bold claim. If you are Bengali, please comment.
Yeah, honestly, I like any Bengali I've met is obsessed with food, and anything in Calcutta, well, yeah, literally everything revolves around food. If you haven't been, and obviously I know this is not the time to travel, but Calcutta to me, and I have been to a lot of other parts of India, I haven't been to Gujarat. I do love a lot of Gujarati food, but I think Calcutta food is just something else. And it's because it's a bit of a melting pot of a lot of other cultures as well. We have obviously traditional Bengali food, and actually both of these are pretty traditional dishes. But then we also have like the colonial influence of food, which is like Anglo-Indian food in Calcutta, which is not curries, which is what Indian British food is. It's the other way around. And then there's also like Indo-Chinese food, which is huge in Calcutta because it has the biggest Chinatown in India. So there's a lot of Cantonese influence in food. And you will get Indian food, like, I don't know, kebabs and other things on the street, as much as you'll get like a hakka chow mein and chili chicken, and like the Chinese kind of influence of food is just as common, including in restaurants where you'll have like a whole Indian, like North Indian or Bengali menu, but then you have like a Chinese subsection to the menu because that's how integrated it is into the culture. I did a few Indo-Chinese supper clubs a year ago, and no one's actually eaten that food because it's not really sold anywhere, but it is great. Chili paneer is a good example. I think a lot of people would have eaten that. That is an Indo-Chinese dish, and it's not Chinese and it's not Indian, but it actually originated from that Chinatown where all these Cantonese immigrants I think it was in the 1700s, came to India, realized that the palate wasn't the same as Cantonese palate. And then they started adding like chilies and like stronger flavors into their base dish. So that's where it came from. It's quite an interesting food journey, that one. But yeah, Calcutta's full of that. There's a lot of, there's like Jewish Bengali food, for example, which you wouldn't even think about exists, but it exists. And there's lots of like old school Jewish bakeries in Calcutta as well.
There seems to be a lot of like embracing of different cultures, like rather than.
It really is, yeah. I like Calcutta obviously used to be a bit of like a hub and a port when it used to be the capital, and then it was very important for like a lot of the British trade as well. But I think generally Bengalis are actually very accepting of different cuisines and tastes, and it's just, I don't know, like it actually stems even as close to, and I know this is with all Indian food, there's hardly any recipes and things aren't documented very well, but Bengali households cook completely different to one another. Like my maternal grandma's house will have very different food to my paternal grandma's house, even though they're all Bengali. But we're very encouraged to like add your own touch to the food. And it's just something that's like quite unique, I think. Like you're very encouraged to like add your own tweaks and like add your own tastes, and it should be suiting your household as opposed to like this is the recipe and this is what you follow. And I love that aspect of it a lot because it's, again, I grew up eating so many different types of Bengali food that to me it's like a whole, I don't know, it's like much bigger than one little bit of India. That's
so interesting. It makes me just actually want to get on a plane and go to Kolkata now.
Yeah. It's so good. And what I was saying right at the beginning, like a lot of our food, especially like the food my grandmas cook, just by default is vegan food. And I know that's very in at the moment, and it has been for a little while, but I grew up actually eating just vegan food pretty much. Like we'd eat fish or meat, you know, once a week when it was like a special thing, but it wasn't the norm. And it's probably become more of a norm now with a lot of my family. But me and Rijal, my partner, like we actually off most of the week we eat vegetarian food. Our base meal is like actually some form of chutney, very similar to this, some sort of vegetable which is dry, and then a dal and a rice. And it's very simple, homey food, but then it can differ every single day by just you varying up the ratios of the spices or the spices itself. And you can never get bored of the food is what I feel.
Yeah, I agree. I think even in Gujarati food, like there's a lot, most of it is vegan. It's only when you introducing yogurt in certain recipes and ghee in certain recipes that, you know, where it's actually, you know, becomes vegetarian. But yeah, we've been at home consciously trying to eat a little bit more vegan, not doing any major steps, but we found it not going to change too much, really.
Likewise. I mean, okay, the one thing I'll never give up is butter, because I really bloody love butter and it's the best thing ever. But apart from that, I'm very happy to eat all this food. It's just if I know it can have butter, I will add butter.
But
it is very easy, I think, to do it with this sort of food. And it's also, and this is one other thing I've spoken about very recently, that like a lot of people think Indian food is really heavy, and it really isn't. Our food is really light, and it's for a hot climate, so we can't be eating heavy food. It's just, I think the British Indian food that's evolved is a bit heavier because, again, it's moved to the Western side of the world. But the food we eat at home, like, it's just so light on your stomach. It shouldn't make you feel like, oh my God, I can't move. Obviously, unless you're eating a lot more than you should be.
Which is the danger when it's very tasty.
Yeah.
That you just, the problem is that you eat too much of it.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna just show you my chutney because mine's, I had it on a slightly higher heat, I think. I just forgot. But oh my God, I can't. It's kind of broken down.
Yeah.
You can keep this going. Like I actually so I kind of take it off the heat a little bit at this point and just like mash it, you know, on the side of the pan with my spoon. So just mash all the pieces together a little bit, turn it a bit more into a cohesive pulp. And actually, if anyone's was drying out, like I know you said in the middle, it was like drying out a little bit. The trick is just to keep adding water and keep cooking down those tomatoes, because you do want that time on the heat. But if it's obviously looking like fried tomatoes, you need to add some water into it every now and then. Because the longer you kind of cook this for, the more the tomatoes like get their flavor enhanced. But you ultimately want it, I'm going to hold up a spoon because I think mine's actually done. You want it to look like kind of like a jammy thing with bits of like pulp. So like, see how it's dripping? It's like dripping slowly. Like that's what you want it to be like.
Okay, I think that I had tomatoes that were quite firm when they went in. So I'm really watery, and I'm just adding water, and I'll just let it cook down, and then might have to.
There's no overcooking this dish, so like even if you cook it a lot, like it's actually nothing's going to happen to it. But just make sure it's got like a wet consistency. Like it shouldn't be dry. That's all.
Okay.
Like the bit more time that you give it, like it's going to have a better flavor. Also, just to say, this lasts really well. If you jar it up, cool it down fully, and then put it in the fridge. Ours doesn't last because we'll just end up eating it with everything, but it does last for like a couple of weeks very easily.
It's good to know.
Cool.
It's a good it also works really good in cheese toasties, if anyone wants to.
Do you know what? That's exactly what I was thinking. And I thought, should I say something, or is she going to think I'm kind of some kind of crazy food person? But in my head, I was thinking, could I put this in a cheese toastie?
I'm all for adding, I mean, I do like cheese. That's the other reason I couldn't be vegan. I'm all for
I actually, I have to admit, I've got some vegan cheese in the fridge that is going to be vegan cheese that goes into my toastie. It's one I haven't tried before. I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay, interesting. I haven't actually tried one that I've liked yet. I have tried a couple, but it does last really well. Also, I'm all for like Indian kind of pickly flavors in cheese toasty things. At some point, I'm going to do like an achar and cheese night with wine, and I think it's going to work really well.
How do I book in for that? Can I reserve the spot now? Well, you said that. I would happily get on a plane to Brisbane. My best friend lives out there, and if the world were a different place, I would get on a plane and be there, so I could do your achar, cheese and wine night.
Just squeezing my lime juice into it. And actually, this is a trick from my grandma. Not with lime, you can also add a bit of vinegar. It really helps like chutneys and pickles like preserve, because it adds that little bit of acid into it. So if you're making another sort of similar condiment thing, add a splash of acid at the end, and it
when it's pretty much cooked, then put in your bit of acid.
Because you don't really want to cook it with the acid, because there's no point in putting it in then. You just want it to kind of run through it, and it helps it preserve a little bit better. I also make a lot of achars. That's like something my family did. My granddad did actually much more than my grandma, and I try and make all those achars and even some of my own ones now, because he taught me how to do a lot of the stuff. So I try and actually use more like local produce to do it. So in the UK, I did a pak choy achar. I've done a purple carrot achar, obviously instead of
Wow.
but yeah, I think again it's one of those things like I'm happy to use whatever like ingredient that's available to do it, but obviously the flavor is going to be the same. But mangoes are again like they're not very local to the UK, and a lot of pickles and achars that you make in India revolve around green mango, which aren't easily available. So green apple's a good substitute.
Sohini, I have to ask, I mean, all of this amazing food chat, all of these recipes, all of this pickling, everything that you're doing, I mean, what's the publishing plan? Surely there's a cookbook on the horizon here, surely.
Yeah, I think so too. I have been writing since I got to Australia. I chatted to Vid like on text and like every now and then, but yeah, I really do want to publish something. I think I will be ready in some time. I have been writing a lot. I've actually been documenting my grandma's recipes recently. And I say recipes, but they give me like 4 words and I have to go and try it out myself. But I really want to actually do something, firstly, that really focuses on what we were talking about like this whole idea of like reclaiming the space in the house and doing it because you want to do it as opposed to you have to do it. And that it's okay to do something that brings out your personality without the expectation that you would have to do that anyway. But what I really want recipe-wise is those recipes documented in a way that really represents Bengali food, because I don't think there's a cookbook that does that. And I look at a lot of cookbooks. I go into the shops and constantly browse, and I don't think anything actually addresses it. So it'd be really good to do that soon. So you guys have to let me know.
Watch this space.
Watch this space. Yeah, no, I really do want to. Like, I think I always want it to be like an ode to like all the matriarchs in my family and all the stuff they've cooked. Because my stuff is, again, like it's a little bit separate, and I want the traditional stuff to be there before my stuff is there. Because people don't know that exists, and they really need to, because it's really tasty, all the stuff.
Oh, definitely. I'd buy it. I'd buy your cookbook. I'm just
Thank
saying.
you. There actually isn't anything in the market that addresses any of that. And in my head, I'm really visualizing something that's like, here's like my maternal side, here's my paternal side, and this is the stuff that they cook, and this is how it comes together into this one big thing. So it would be really good to do that at some point very soon.
So I suppose just to wrap up, maybe we should like everyone share their dishes.
Actually, you know what would be good? Everyone try one of the potatoes, because you need to taste the food that you've cooked. You might need a bit more salt, you might need a bit more lime. So everyone have a piece, and I will also have a piece.
I'm actually hungry, so not
Okay.
yeah.
Is it too early?
Exciting. Moment of truth.
That's great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Mm.
It's got like a tangy kick to it, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's street foodie. It's meant to be like in a little packet, and then you just pick at it.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. But like I said, obviously it really depends on like if you need a bit more salt, you need a bit more lime or whatever. Like it should kind of balance and be quite punchy. That's the aim. And then lots of coriander on top when you're eating it is always.
I will definitely be making that again.
Great. I'm so happy.
Super tasty.
If anyone also want, like, this dish works really well with sweet potato as well, and or carrots. So you can also try like the exact same thing with, you need like a kind of vegetable that has a bite. So it works really well with that. And likewise with the chutney, I mean, I always taste like the back of my spoon when I'm doing it usually, but it should almost be like a really intense, sweet and tangy tomatoey flavor is what you're going for. Like, so definitely have a taste, because you might need a bit more sugar, you might need some more dates. A lot of it does depend on the tomatoes that you're using. And I've said this when I've taught this to anyone else, that yeah, like my tomatoes might be like completely different to what you're cooking with. So you need to have that flavor judgment.
I think I'm going to have to leave my chutney kind of just finishing off, and it'll
That's
finish
fine.
off camera, I think, and I'll post a picture on this on social media later to let people know how it turns out. But I mean, I think it smells